So I've been I've been described as a BIM evangelist in the past, and I've been working in BIM for too many years now, starting with AutoCAD when it first launched its Windows version too many years ago. But up until a year ago, I was responsible for the partnerships BIM strategy and driving the BIM agenda from a client's perspective into the partnership. That had very little operational accountability, and then through a restructure and some other things that went on, I then got an operational accountability, and I then realised that everything I'd been preaching for the last few years, I needed to turn into reality. And what I want to just describe to you this afternoon is just a bit of that journey. It won't be a hugely technical presentation. I wouldn't attempt to compete with certainly the last two presentations that I've witnessed. But what I want to try and do is bring in the concept at the end of this construction chain. There is a client who has to use that building, and when we all started on this journey many years ago, we recognised the value of the building once it was built. But the agenda still too much talks about the process of construction and not necessarily how we use the building. This is the only bit of data I'm going to put up, but this is a graph that I've extracted from the NBS National BIM report from last year. And I was quite encouraged when I first started to look at it. So that said, we now have 78% of the industry collaborating. I'm not quite sure what the rest of the industry is doing if you don't collaborate. We're still producing a lot of 2D drawings, but actually the elements of 3D modelling seems to have taken a great leap forward. We're actually sharing the models, the percentages are starting to drop. We're actually even, half of us are now starting to use BIM models from the start to the end of the project. And we are starting to get used to that. We're still not really, 2/3 of us are still not putting together those models. And the bit that I'm involved with is under 30% of construction projects that have been that people were involved with over the last 12 months actually pass the data on to the FM team. And that for me was an eye-opening statistic, because for me it really encapsulates the problem the industry has. And the problem doesn't sit with the industry, in my view. The problem sits with the client, because the client doesn't understand the benefits of the information that they're going to receive. And if the clients don't understand the benefits, in the long term, the opportunity for some of this stuff is really limited. If the benefits are limited, then the costs for driving all of this wonderful technology that we've looked at start to become limited, because the information isn't available to the client when they have finished. So, why does this happen? Well, I think it is actually the client's problem, because there is absolutely no clarity on what their desire is at the beginning of a project when it is going through its inception. The client the end users don't get necessarily enough input on the process. I was talking to a colleague of mine only last night who is currently building a hospital very near where I am, and I said to him, "What's your BIM strategy? How are you delivering that?" And bearing in mind this is an architect who's made the leap into project management. He said, "Well, I asked the client what they wanted, and they said, let me go away and think about it." And they came back and they said, "Right, I want BIM level 3. It's the best." So the client really doesn't understand what they're asking for, and actually, my advice was don't go anywhere near it. Just help them through to a level 2 strategy, and then we get there. And I said, "Aren't you mandated to do it? Doesn't it part of it?" Well, it's a privately funded project, and actually, really nobody cares, because once we've built this building, we're going to hand it over to somebody else, and then do you know what? They're going to get on and run it. And this is the problem, that there is no clarity at the beginning. So therefore, I think it's incumbent on the client to absolutely provide the structure and provide the requirements for what they need through that process. The clients need to provide time to dedicate to it. These conversations aren't necessarily about BIM, about Revit, about any other tool that you want to use. It's what information do you want to get from any information. I think gone are the days where we can use O&M manuals to hold doors open. And listen, I went down into the basement of our office building in Victoria and found the microfiches of the original building still all beautifully filed that hadn't been looked at for decades. And you say, and that's the point, nobody looks at this information. If the client provides the thinking about what they want, they then dictate to the supply chain's responsibility to unlock their vision as to what that might be. But it needs to be done at inception. And what I found as a client when we did some of this work is actually there was a bit of a surprise from the supply chain. I worked on the John Lewis Westfield development, and we ran a whole a BIM strategy through that project. And one of the guys said to me that was on the supply chain, so I've just worked with a very well-known phone provider in building a store for them, and this stuff you're talking about is more advanced than they are putting into their physical spaces. So everyone knows retail is in trouble. Everyone knows that the high street is a problem. Nobody's making any money. I didn't like the reference to Amazon. That's causing us a load of grief. But when we were building a new build estate, these were some of our strategic objectives around a digital strategy. It was about creating that collaborative work team. It was about using the supply chain, what they were really good at. It was about providing leadership in a sector which had been slow to adopt technology in the construction and management of its spaces. We looked at productivity. We mainly focused on new build. It was about showing people what the space would look like. We looked to try and coordinate it to minimise mistakes during build. And we capped the as-built deliverables to absolutely what we wanted, but to also minimise the cost and not create these huge data sets that we then had to manage. Actually, that's emerging now into a different set of objectives where some of them are still the same, and the key is it's driven by this priority here. We still want to have very much a collaborative working team. We've changed from a supplier-led initiatives to now we understand a bit more about what we want. We are starting to dictate these requirements ourselves. We are trying desperately to connect our systems together, to talk to each other and to produce the right data. Still drives productivity. It's about an existing estate opportunity. Most of what we will manage for the next 10 years we've already built, we've already got. There'll be small interventions, there won't be wholesale rebuilds. It's not so much about visualization, it's more about data. We still coordinate things, and actually the as-built information that we're getting back, we are testing and we are using. We then get a set of data that we build over time. Because we are working with an existing asset, we have a set of data. Apologies for the spelling mistake for those of you who've noticed it. We're all fallible. But this model is about how you layer in information every time we have an interface with a building. So by setting out our requirements with real clarity at the beginning of a project and asking the supply chain to move to work within our requirements, we are starting to really determine and generate data-rich models. It's about data, it's not necessarily about simply visualization. Once a building is built, we can go and look at it. If we want to change it, then actually we have the opportunity to change things in there, but that wholesale visualization piece isn't a requirement. We're asking people absolutely what they want, not from a projects perspective, from an operations perspective, from a maintenance perspective, and also what can our customers get the benefit from the information that we hold in the model. But it's these two areas where we drive value through the process. So what I want to do now is just walk you through two very simple examples of where we've created value in a BIM model, or through a BIM strategy. This is our Victoria office. It's a 45-year-old building, or certainly the HVAC systems are 45 years old on it. That's when they were last refurbished. We've got 2,800 workstations. We've got 12 working floors, 2 basements, 2 plant levels. I've been generous where we say we've got poor records. In some areas, we have no records, and we have no single refurbishment project that would ever justify the investment that we needed to make to create a fully coordinated BIM model. We've also got somewhere in the region of 6,000 to 7,000 people that visit this building and have to work in this building, so we can't take it all to bits and put it all back together again, even virtually. So we have a problem. So what I did was I had a point cloud survey done of the building. We created a central data point. We then set the requirements for the interfaces that we had, and we looked for the value that we could create. And we went into various levels around things like desk churn, around an LED refurbishment project, around looking at some of the M&E performance. But we looked for value within that we create. And when we say creating value, it's making things simpler, making things cheaper, and it's making things quicker. I love that the versions of where you were looking at the way that James was talking about, the way that you can optimize building layouts in a space. It got my mind buzzing. Could we do that with desk layouts and start to understand? Because then actually it's not about construction. As we churn the building and as we churn the space, could we optimize the desk layouts? Could we even do that in a retail unit to optimize the space in a branch? That's where you start to create value. That's where you start to create the investment business case for doing some of this stuff. So these were some of the principles that we adopted. We started big. We wanted to go bigger. We went all in. So we dumped all our CAD information. We dumped and we created one central product resource for that. We documented the process. You have to spend time. Remember what I said earlier? You have to invest time in creating some of this stuff. They are the most boring meetings in the world, but you have to do them, and you then get benefit from them. And in doing that, we were really clear about the information we wanted. We were clear about the structure, so how were the various disciplines going to play nicely together. We did it in a way that people would understand. So whether it's PAS 1192 or 19650, we did it with a structure that people would understand. We invested the time, we gave people access, and then we kept a record of that, of how we created value. So this looks wonderful, but it's completely agnostic in terms of data. Once we start to get into the space, well, you can see there we've got LED light fittings model. It's not particular. I mean, we can create photorealistic visualizations from these models, but this was a quick render just to show that we've got, we could schedule off the LED fittings. We've got other areas with different types of fittings, but nobody really wants to look above the ceiling. So we've created not a scanned model, but an interpreted model from our information that we do have, which was a series of drawings. So we can now take the ceiling away, and we can start to look at what's up there and start to plan our refurbishments as well. So we can do that very easily within the space. We don't have to disturb the users. We don't have to start taking the ceiling down, poking cameras up and having a look at that. And that is creating speed and efficiency in our programs as well. We needed to replace our cooling towers. Here's a good example of creating small value and going all in, because once we'd gone all in, we had all of this information. We wanted to replace our cooling towers on the top of the building. We needed to design a steel frame. Historically, we would have gone in and surveyed that. There would have been a cost for that. The structural engineer would have given us all sorts of reasons why he needed it. But from the BIM model, we guaranteed him the accuracy of it. He then we removed the need of a survey, saved us 1,500 quid. We put that on the register, and slowly we're chipping away at the investment we've made in generating this information. Here's another really silly, small example, but highlights it. You'd never do this in a BIM model on its own. All of those glass panes there, as I say, are as old as the building. If you, some of the other similar types of buildings further down the road have taken all those sealed units out and replaced them all. We can't afford to take them all out and replace them. We only replace the sealed units that are failing. That gives you, as you can see there, as you look across the building, a bit of a patchwork quilt around the glazing to do that. But we need to keep a record of the units that we have replaced. This was the way we used to do it up until about 6 months ago, which was one of the guy who runs the capital works for me had a set of information, and he'd been through and he'd taken a drawing and he'd labelled every single window, and there's something like if we said there's 4 panes of glass per window, you know, so base 17, module A, we replaced it April 2018, we should be fine for 10 years now. So very heavily manual, spent hours keeping his records up to date. He's brilliant at it, but a huge industry doing it, and then we held that information in a spreadsheet. What we've done now is we've taken the BIM model and we've overlaid where we've replaced bits of glass, so we can start to attach information into the model. You'd never justify that in a single aspect. It's all and it lowers the risk, but you'd never justify that in terms of just investing in time and space to do that on its own. It's about creating that value, and hey presto, it schedules it all now, automatic. Looks the same spreadsheet, but it does it all automatically for us. So, in conclusion, solutions will need to work for your organisation, and as a client, that's really, really important. I've looked at, I get so many calls of people who try to flog me systems on the basis of what I might be able to get them to do. We are developing a system which answers our needs, and that might be a bespoke system. It might be something that we're tailoring. We're developing our own processes which start to justify that. We started by identifying the need and where the value is for our business, and in creating that value, which we determine as simpler, cheaper and quicker, can be in the simplest of places. Record keeping and a single source of data and geometry is absolutely important, and I believe that by adding the clarity and adhering to the principles that we've had in the past, then we can make a success of this, and the value we'll generate will take the information that we keep and the way we run our buildings to the next level. Bit of a canter through. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening to me. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?